This is Look West, a podcast from California's Assembly Democrats.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Ocampo with Look West. Birthright citizenship guarantees that all children born in the U.S. are citizens, but Trump is attacking this fundamental right that's been the law of the land for over 125 years. Assembly Democrats are pushing back. Assemblymember Alex Lee is the author of Legislation Committee California to Birthright Citizenship. As we continue our immigration series, Assemblymember Lee sat down with our producer Armando Jimenez to talk about his family's immigration story, how anti-immigration forces use lies to stoke fear, and his birthright citizenship resolution.
Thank you for being here, Assemblymember Lee. Today's going to be a special episode, just like all the other ones as well. This is going to touch a little bit on the AJR 5 and the importance, especially with everything going on right now in California and across the states. But before we, touch on the resolution, kind of wanted to chat a little bit about your story, your family. What's your immigration story, and why does this mean so much to you?
Yeah, this means a lot to me for two things. One, my district that I represent is 60% API. My home county of Santa Clara County, I think it's like 40% of people are foreign born, not born in America. I was very lucky to be born in America. I was a birthright citizen because when my parents came here, they weren't citizens yet. I actually do remember vividly when my mom had to study for the citizenship test and all these things. More than, frankly, I'm sure a lot of high schoolers know about the Constitution and American history, but she studied for it. And my parents became naturalized when I was still probably elementary school or older still. Yeah, maybe middle school even. So they came here, and my family history goes all the way back to, I always joke, it's like, I don't bother with taking an Ancestry.com test or anything. Number one, and this is my ability later, but it's like, you surrender all the rights of your ancestors and your descendants when you take those tests because your genetic out there. But secondly, is I don't want to pay like $100 for them to give me 100% say you're from southern China, because that's where all my family is from, literally from that area, since they were like peasants and aristocrats. So like they've always been in that area. But my family fled because the Japanese invasion during World War II, then the Civil War, the warlord era. I've actually been doing a bit more research into my great grandfather. And it's kind of crazy to think that he lived through the fall of the last empire, the rise of the republic, the fall of the republic, and then the rise of the communist era as well. And so my family has been through a lot. Southern China is a hotbed for very many different political movements. My family then fled to Hong Kong, which was at the time, up until when I was 2 years old, 1997, was still a British colony. So they immigrated to Hong Kong. Because of that, because as part of the British Empire, I actually was born technically a British subject too, as well as an American citizen. So I have two birthrights. But anyway, so they came over here. My dad was part of the Silicon Valley 80s, 90s scene. What I like to call is when Silicon Valley wasn't cool, when tech wasn't cool. It was people in cubicles with polo shirts and designing stuff. So he came here for that. He studied at Stanford. To the disappointment, I did not get to Stanford. My mom was a nurse, and she worked at our county hospital all the way up until this year when she retired. So, they really took their lives from Hong Kong, brought it here, and hoped to, make it better and everything. So make the lives better for themselves and for me. And so I've always been very privileged to be able to live in America. I'm the first in my entire family lineage to be American. We call it ABC, American Born Chinese. So I'm the first one to be able to do that. And, everyone has that immigrant story, whether you're from South America, Europe, Africa, or especially Asia. We have people from all over the world that have found their path here, and it has not ever really been easy or straightforward. And especially now, with this federal regime, it has made it intensely complicated, intensely unmanageable, because if we want pathway to citizenship for people, we have to look at our history, we have to look at our own personal history, but national histories, and how we have to undo all those wrongs, right?
Do you mind touching a little bit on, I don't know if you remember, or maybe you've spoken to your parents about this, some of the struggles of, obviously you were born here, but they just came as immigrants. Some of the struggles like getting jobs, housing. How hard and how challenging was that for your family when they came over here?
So I do think, I'll touch upon this later, but, the way that our immigration system now has changed from quotas being overtly racist to now job preference, which is just covertly racist, that's said now, they benefited from that, right? Because my dad was Stanford educated, all these cool things, and he worked in tech. Is great. My mom's a nurse, so they all benefited from those categories of job placements that which you see reflected in the Asian diaspora. Why is overrepresented in a lot of people with these strong skill sets is because those are the people that are allowed to come through legally and migrate here. Let's call it the straightforward path. Let's not the easy path, but it's a straightforward path. They were able to do that. So for them, it was relatively, I think, straightforward. They also benefited at the time. Technically, they came from a Western country because we belonged to the British Empire. So we also still were part of the overseas. In fact, though, I do remember my other family, they did, though, move out of Hong Kong for my more extended family, moved out of Hong Kong for a second because they were afraid of the handover in 97 when China took back Hong Kong. So they actually lived in Vancouver because when you're part of the British Dominion, you can move anywhere. And so Canada's a part of the British Dominion. They said it's way easier going to Canada and getting housing and all this stuff than America. So, but we were benefited from the fact that my dad and my mom had very high skilled, highly sought after skill sets and great education. And, we benefit from that.
There's some misconceptions about immigrants. One of them is that kind of is floating around with the federal government right now, with the new office that just took over, is immigrants are taking all our jobs.
Yeah.
What's your opinion, or kind of how do you feel about all that information or false information going out?
Well, the federal fascist regime really spreads a lot of fear and misinformation. Just to note that, it's Republican regimes that use taxpayer dollars to sensationalize and create theatrics of fear, where they create things like alligator Alcatraz, which now is already like falling apart and everything, or trying to take our original Alcatraz Island and turn it into a detention center. They thrive off of fear and making people afraid of immigrants, when the reality of this country has always been that we have been better because of immigration. And there's a lot of fear, right? They promulgate the Great Replacement theory, where people of color will replace white people and all these things. Obviously, it's all the thinly veiled white supremacy, racist BS that they convey. So it's all that, right? But the reality is that the ICE, DHS, the federal administration, Trump, they all say they're using immigration to get rid of criminals and worse the worst, all these things. I mean, it came down from the famous escalator speech in 2016, right? We came down the escalator and he said he's going to take care of all the, people in Mexico who are cartel, rapists, all this stuff. But it's not true. Because even today, over 70% of the people that ICE is detained, most of the time, I don't think they even frankly know who they're picking up. Over 70% of them have no criminal convictions. They have no criminal record. And so they're picking up people at the places of work or at the places where they get their car washed. They are causing actively people to be killed, falling to their death, or being hit by cars. Those are only the cases that we do know. And of course, even now, when, like in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the government wrongly sent someone to El Salvador where they shouldn't have done. They came back, they said they're wrong, and now they're like, oh, we messed up, but we're going to send them to Uganda now instead. It's ridiculous, right? So it's like they promulgate all these myths and harmful stereotypes about immigrants. But I think more and more people, even Trump supporters, are seeing how ridiculous it is, because it's easy to say, it's essentialized to say that we're only going after the criminals. But in fact, when you see all people of color or all people who didn't immigrate the right way as criminals, then everyone's fair game. And I think even people who were Trump supporters in other states are coming to regret their choice.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different video footage of mothers, grandmothers being taken away from their kids, and fathers as well. Kind of touching on that a little bit, like you said, I think it's amazing that 62% of your district is Asian. How has your community responded to all the recent immigration raids and immigration stuff going on in your district that you've at least witnessed, or maybe your district office has dealt with?
Yeah. Well, certainly there's a lot of fear and anxiety. The Rapid Response Network in Santa Clara County went up like 800 calls a month or something, like a very large amount. I mean, a lot of it is coming from people thinking they're ICE raids or police things. So far right now, there aren't the mass kind of militarized operations you see in, say, Los Angeles County or Southern California, but there's a lot of fear about that, right? We're always worried about what will come next. People are preparing to try and stay organized, and people are actually very tearfully and worried about figuring out what's going to happen to their parents, what's going to happen to their children. And I think there's a lot of fear and anxiety, but luckily, even in our home counties, we are creating immigrant defense funds. We're creating a lot of mutual aid networks, and we're making sure that if the worst is to happen, we'd be prepared.
Yeah, fear is one of the main things happening right now. For example, my two aunts came from Mexico, and they were scared to go for a walk, even though they were from Mexico. But they're like, I don't know, I don't want to be detained. Are they going to stop me just because I'm walking? Like, they had fear, and they were here visiting. But I did hear that California is trying to bring some more transparency around immigration enforcement. Like you mentioned, there has been masked officers.
Yeah.
Another thing that's really important that's been highlighted is the safety at schools and at churches. How do you feel about the transparency? Have you heard anything that California is possibly working on related to transparency on enforcement?
Yeah, we're doing a series and packages of legislation. Even this first week in September, we've already passed several different bills about making sure that students and parents and faculty, of course, are notified if there's ICE activity at their university or their schools. Trying to pass legal counsel for unaccompanied minors, children in immigration courts, which of course we know when they go to court as a child, they're completely toast in the system. And then of course there's also pending legislation about mass vigilantes, these cosplayers basically out there who want to go and play sheriff and this stuff. And I also want to bring some attention to that is because ICE right now is offering lucrative packages now that the Republicans gave them a larger budget than ICE itself, more money than some militaries in the world. These are still basically mass vigilantes, right? They show up, pop out of unmarked vans and trucks with their jeans and their bulletproof vests, and they're all militia cosplayers and these things, and they kidnap people without warrants. This is not, this is not real law enforcement. This is deputized gang violence. What you're seeing, and right now they're recruiting, right? They're recruiting with mass propaganda and heavy benefits. Benefits that include, by the way, student loan relief that the conservatives apparently are super against, and now you're going to give this to people. But the point is, I'm saying is like ISIS propaganda. Part of the entire tagline they're saying, and they're recruiting patriots, it says defend the homeland, which is, if you study any sort of history, is a thinly veiled ethno-nationalist rally call. And this is the whole idea, right? Is they want to recruit people to police people of color, to raid them, to throw people at unmarked vans and send them to now, countries even in Africa that people have no connection to and other places. So it's really, in that way, it is the politics of fear and the spectacle, right? They know exactly what they're doing by sending the troops and sending mass vigilantes out because they're not interested in immigration enforcement. Immigration enforcement is actually very boring. It's all paperwork, right? It's paperwork, it's process adaptation. There's no cops and robbers involved in a sense, it's not really how it works. And the Republicans like to say that it's all about like protecting public safety and all these things, but it's always like there's no link between criminality and immigrants. There's like no link to be shown at that. In fact, it's much more so in the case of domestic citizens to be the case. But anyways, it's just ridiculous, and it's frankly the reign of terror is just beginning.
Yeah, and I think what really touched home, for a lot of people, including myself, is how it affects all the kids, students, young children that no longer have their parents here. Like just imagining all the kids that aren't citizens, for example. Can you tell us a little bit about Assembly Joint Resolution 5, what it is? Do you mind going and walking through us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I authored and introduced Assembly Joint Resolution 5, which will probably be out of the legislature and official position of the state of California by the end of September.
Okay.
And AGR 5 does something very simple. It affirms the over a century's precedence that children born in America are American citizens. And why is this important is because on the first day of the Trump administration, President Trump, he signed an executive order trying to reinterpret the Constitution, trying to overthrow over a century of precedents because they specifically want to stop children from being born in America and attaining American citizenship, which has been the undisputed norm for so long.
All right.
And why is this the case? So that they can now determine who is a citizen, who is not a citizen, and thus use ICE, their secret police, to go after those people, right? That is a huge monumental shift that even I think not enough people are talking about in the media, because luckily right now it's all being held up and gummed up in the courts, except the Supreme Court, this conservative Supreme Court, has yet failed to rule the merits of the case and say it is unconstitutional. And the second thing about AGR 5 is to remind people that this is a multicultural fight because the 14th Amendment, which was passed after the Civil War to enfranchise people who were formerly enslaved, right, in 1865, that was 14th Amendment, it finally made whole the idea of birthright citizenship when Wong Kim-ark, a San Francisco-born Chinese American, sued the then administration and took it all the way up to the Supreme Court. Wong Kim-ark, he went to go visit his family in China, and when he returned, The border agents basically were like, oh, no, we can't let you in. You're not a citizen. They're like, I am a citizen. I was born here. And that's how it happened, the whole case. And he took the case all the way up to the Supreme Court at the time, 1898. Remember, this is still the Chinese Exclusion Act era. This is still where Asian people are very, very much being lynched still. He took it all the way up to the Supreme Court and he won. And he made it possible for this idea that people from all over the world, if they're born in America, especially if they have immigrant parents, right, they are now American citizens. And this is now used, even though it was created in the 14th Amendment to enfranchise Black descendants, and it was made whole by an Asian American. It is now being weaponized, especially against Latino immigrants, right? And this is what's going to happen today. And if the Trump administration is successful in reinterpreting birthright citizenship, it would disenfranchise millions of children.
Correct.
I mean, it all depends also, where they start that line, right? And what now happens to suddenly all these former citizens' children, maybe even adults, who have lived their entire lives and have become stateless, right? And that is perfect fodder for them. Because even though you've never crossed the border in your life, you've never done anything wrong, you're technically illegal now, and now you're undocumented. It's ridiculous, but that's what they want. And I always want to stress that people, it's like, it's not even just about if someone crossed the border illegally or they're undocumented or whatever. This is basically saying, even if you're out here on a visa, and this has been very clear with Trump Mission number 1, is they don't even care about legal immigrants. Visa holders and the like, they don't count too. They're just as liable to be deported. They don't get the same rights as well. Even that's been established from even under Republican presidencies, that visa holders have been acknowledged as doing it the right way. They don't even care anymore. It's just, you're an immigrant.
At this point, you're just,
it's out the door.
time for you to go. Yeah, that's horrible, man. And beyond the resolution, do you guys have any events or anything in your district that you guys are doing that's going to help the community and the immigrant communities?
Yeah, I mean,
specifically
early in the year too, we did do, I think it was an event commemorating Wong Kim-ark's life. It was on one of the anniversaries. I mean, these are the 3-digit anniversaries now, but it was anniversary. We did it in San Francisco Chinatown on Sacramento Street, where it was the birthplace of Wong Kim-ark, to recognize how long the Chinese presence has been in America and, of course, in California. So we did that. We also recognize his descendant, Norman, on the assembly floor.
Mm-hmm.
But going to the district, we've been very active in working with our community groups to make sure people know their rights, understand, and more people have been signing up for the rapid response networks to be trained. I tend to want to share as much information to people as possible for people to know their rights, even though some conservative people seem to be mad at that. But, people should know their rights. But I think it's really important just to be very, very aware of what's going on and to be able to protect your neighbors. But yeah, we do a lot of things low-key, out of the spotlight, because we also don't want, people certain
with the bad intentions and stuff.
People with bad intentions to be doing things like that.
Yeah, that's smart. I did want to ask, can everybody else in the United States look west of California? Are we leading the way when it comes to immigration?
I think in many ways we are, and in some ways we aren't. I'll just start with the negative, is that before the big ugly bills happened, our own administration already proposed, and it's going to happen, booting off undocumented people from healthcare, from Medi-Cal, from food assistance, all these things. And it hasn't been as smooth, I think, when it comes to defending and really materially defending immigrant rights and assistance as it ought to be. And I think it's been a struggle. I mean, California, of course, for a while, right, it took like a decade just to do the driver's license thing where people could drive legally. It's kind of ridiculous. Now, looking back on it, it's like ridiculous, right? Yeah, we're like, why did it take that long, right? So, I think in many ways, California is still reeling from the ghosts of Prop 192, where we still had that extreme white supremacy and stuff. That still exists, these undercurrents, and we can't take that for granted. But I am proud that we have prioritized immigrant defense. We have prioritized our very material ways, defending immigrants' rights legally and so forth, and also making sure that it's consistent in our values. The hard part is just making sure all our actions are there, because when we say immigrants are valued and all these things, we don't want them obviously to be deported or kidnapped by masked men.
Correct.
At the same time, are we making sure that they have every same access and equal opportunity to education, healthcare, all the I think that's hard, right? And I don't know if any other state necessarily, I would say, I'm envious of their policies towards immigrants more than us necessarily, but I do think it's important that we continue to push the envelope and do maybe uncomfortable things at first, right? Because yes, we should, I hope we do, all rally against mass kidnapping and deportations to countries that people don't even care about. And this is happening, of course, to visa holders, citizens, and undocumented people. But we also have to say that this country is founded on a very basic premise. Our democracy is founded on a very basic premise is that democracy or representation is based on residency, is based on people live, right? I represent a district where there's 500,000 people that live. Not all citizens, they're not all voters because there's a lot of children. So it's about representing the people that live there. And if all the people that live there, and for the most part, especially immigrants also pay taxes, why do they not have equal access to our democracy? And there have been pushes back in my hometown of saying we should have universal suffrage, right? Where that immigrants who lived here their whole lives, visa holders, people should also be able to vote, right? And I think we have to continually push that because if we are a society that values and is immigrants, so we have to really make that whole and consistent everywhere. So, we're doing okay, I think, but there's a lot to be desired, I think, still in California.
Did you have anything else that you want to mention in regards to the immigration topic or knowing your right campaigns or anything of that nature?
Just to always be a lookout for, listeners and everyone to think about in California. This is our first year during the Trump administration and the militarized ICE raids. So a lot of it's about like the first lines of defense. I think next year you'll see more first lines of offense against weaponized immigration raids. So this year it's about protecting people's rights, expanding legal counsel, expanding our ability to do so. Like even in the beginning of the year, we passed over $50 million to have our DOJ, Department of Justice, countersue, and now they've sued like for almost 3rd times or something. And also $25 million in legal aid to immigrants. So that was like the first thing we did. It was just like defense. Now we're thinking about, okay, increasing our defense, but how do we go on the offense? And I think that's what people can look forward to 2026.
Okay, perfect. Immigrants are California, right? That's what California is. So thank you for your time, and I hope to chat with you soon.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our thanks to Assemblymember Lee for being on this episode. We will have more personal stories in our immigration series in the coming months. And thanks to you for listening. I'm Stephanie Ocampo with Look West.
The Look West podcast is produced by the DCO Pod Squad for the California Assembly Democrats. Please like, subscribe, and share this episode. When you think of Californian politics, remember to look west.